Did you know that the Old Fashioned is one of America's oldest and most famous cocktails, with origins that reach back to the early 1800s? Although it wasn't always called the Old Fashioned, and it's true that you can trace the usage of the word cocktail back to Europe, even earlier than that. But we're focused on the American classic today, and its story begins in the late 1700s, early 1800s, when it was known as the whiskey cocktail. Then, a cocktail was defined as a mixture of sugar, water, bitters, and booze. But it might surprise you to learn that the original whiskey cocktail wasn't served with ice. Actually, liquid water was its water element, and it wasn't served down in a rocks glass. It was actually served up in a small coupe glass and drunk, and consumed in one gulp rather than slowly sipped over lots of time like we would do it now. So how did we get from there to here? Well, as you probably guessed, the mixture of sugar, water, bitters, and booze was one that was really popular and stuck and was highly sought after. People went out to bars and looking for bartenders who could properly mix sugar, water, bitters, and booze. And because it was so highly sought after, bartenders immediately started to try to experiment and expand on the original cocktails with variations all their own, trying to do what we're all trying to do, what everybody's trying to do in the bar game really, is put their name on a cocktail. This is my creation, this is the famous one. And they didn't limit their experiments to just whiskey. They branched out to gin and rum and others, including whiskey, trying to make their own unique variation of a cocktail. They even started to add liqueurs and chartreuses and even absinthe to mix up and make their cocktails shine with exotic flavors. And some of those ideas would stick around, like the absinthe spritz and a Sazerac from New Orleans. By the time Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday were having their famous shootout at the OK Corral in the late 1800s, bartenders and establishments across the country had their own versions of cocktails, each more exotic than the last, each one adding a different, weird, crazy, never heard of flavor at that time to their cocktails. Something else had happened in the bar community, though, at that time, and it was that bar patrons had grown really tired of the experimentation. Each cocktail being different than the last. Order a whiskey cocktail in one place, you get something different in another place. And they started to crave and ask for the simple mixture of sugar, water, bitters, and booze. Asking for their whiskey cocktails the old-fashioned way. The name stuck, and the legend was born with two important distinctions. First, it would be served down in a rocks glass and on ice as its water element. It would also be consumed over lots of time rather than taken in one shot. I'm going to show you my rendition of an old-fashioned. I'm going to stick as close to what you might find in the late 1800s as possible, with a few variations. And I encourage you to make your own variations. Experiment and find what you like in your cocktails. So we're going to start with a chilled glass because I like to build my old fashions in the glass and on the rock. This we're going to start with a tempered ice as well. I like to do this because the old fashioned is supposed to be minimally diluted, minimally sweet, with the whiskey being the star of the show. The bitters and the sugar are there to uplift the whiskey flavor and bring it out and make it the star of the show. So I don't do it in the mixing tin because I think, for me at least, it adds too much dilution. There are some cocktails that go in the mixing tin. If you make your old fashioned in the mixing tin, no problem. I like to make it in the glass because the chilled glass and the tempered large ice can give the right amount of chill without giving too much dilution, because the Big Rock, not to nerd out on you too much, but the Big Rock has less surface area than the rocks ice, and then that has less surface area than pebble ice. So the more surface area your ice has, the more chilling power it has, the more dilution power it has. And since this is supposed to be minimally diluted, we're going to go with a tempered ice cube into a chilled rocks glass to give us the cold and the dilution that we want. We're going to start with 4 dashes of Angostura bitters. This is a Japanese dasher, as I'm sure most of you know. So 4 dashes is actually 8 dashes in this because each actual motion is a half a dash. So we're going to throw 4 dashes in here. All right. little extra half dash there at the end because I like the bitters anyway. Then we're going to do a rich turbinado syrup. This syrup is rich because it is 2-to-1 sugar to water ratio. It is got more sweetening power than simple 1-to-1 simple syrup. I like turbinado because it, like Demerara, it is unrefined and it has a lot of its molasses flavor qualities still in it. That's why it's dark like this. It packs a delicious flavor that pairs really well with the barrel-aged spirits that we're going to use. And we're going to do just a bar spoon of this because we want enough sweetness to bring, the good flavors of the whiskey out, but not so much sweetness that it's sugar overloaded. All right. And then we're going to use rye whiskey in this cocktail because, believe it or not, there was a time where rye whiskey was the most popular whiskey in the United States. And back when Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday were having their fun, you would have probably been served a rye whiskey old-fashioned had you just asked for a regular old-fashioned. It would fall behind bourbon pretty quickly, especially with the rise of corn as a cash crop in the United States. There's obviously no connection there. So we're going to use this rye whiskey. This cost me about $55 at the liquor store. It's my favorite, but if you don't want to spend that much money, feel like that's breaking the bank a little bit, but you don't want to sacrifice quality, I would recommend the Rittenhouse 100 proof rye whiskey. This cost me about $30 at the liquor store. It's still really, really good. Got a lot of really good flavor notes, really good characteristics. It's also 100 proof, so that's not bad. But it's cheaper. This was about $30, and it'll go a little further. If you don't like rye whiskey or you're want to go even cheaper than that, I also would recommend this Four Roses bourbon. This was about $20 at the liquor store. That's going to make a perfect old-fashioned. Bourbon is a popular old-fashioned main ingredient anyway, so you can absolutely go with that. And as always, you can go with whatever you want. Don't let me tell you what you have to make your cocktails with. We need our measuring tool, don't we? All right, so we're going to go with 2 ounces of this in the glass. A little splash there, but I would rather overpour the measurement than underpour it at all. So there's that for you. The ice is nice and tempered because it did not crack as we put that on there. And then we're going to give this a nice stir to make sure that the chill gets on there, the proper dilution gets on there, and it's a ready-to-drink cocktail. I'd also say that building it in the glass like this, putting it on the rock instead of stirring it with smaller rocks, is also going to give the cocktail a little more longevity. It's not going to die out as fast from the water content. Okay, so now we are going to introduce a simple garnish, and it leads me into, did you know that fruit, particularly muddled fruit in the cocktail, the orange slice and the cherry, weren't actually introduced until Prohibition in the 1920s? And that's mostly because everybody's Uncle Brillo was running moonshine whiskey as fast and as hot as they possibly could, probably through a radiator to condense it down to avoid detection by law enforcement and to get tax-free income out there as quickly as they possibly could. So in short, it tasted so bad. And if you're standing in somebody's dank basement, because believe it or not all speakeasies were nice like you see it in the movies in the 1920s. Most places were somebody's random outdoor cellar that everyone's huddled into drinking radiator whiskey. And because it tasted so bad, you had to have something put into the cocktail to cover that up, to make it even. I mean, if you're going to drink whiskey that's going to make you go blind, it might as well kind of taste good while you're doing it. We don't have to worry about that because we have really good stuff. It's not run through a radiator. It's properly made. And it tastes really good, and it should be the star of the show. So I don't muddle anything in there. I don't like the bitterness that the pith and the orange can give it if you smash it in there. I don't like the bits of the cherry. I've never been a very big fan of pulp anyway. So I'm not a fan of smashing stuff in there. If you really like it, I say go for it, but I like a clean old-fashioned. I do enjoy the fruit additions with the orange peel, giving this a nice effervescent spritz on top of the cocktail. A little wiping motion in action. It gives it a really nice citrus on the nose, and I think that it actually does a lot for the Old Fashioned. So I'm not completely anti-fruit for the Old Fashioned, but I am anti-muddling, definitely. And after we give it that effervescent little spritz there, we're going to cut it up just so that it's nice and pretty on the rim of the glass. And that way, since this will be there, we'll continue to have that effervescent smell come off of that, because the citrus meeting you with the barrel-aged spirits is really nice. I'm also going to put a cherry into the cocktail. I like my Luxardo cherries in the cocktail because I really think that the cherry flavor goes really well with the barrel-aged spirits. I'm not going to leave too much syrup on the cherry. I'm going to try to get as much off of that as I can, because again, I'm not trying to overpower the whiskey. I'm just trying to give it a little pairing that will end up elevating the cocktail. I'm going to put that right down in there. And that right there is really it. Nice and simple. Cherry, orange peel as the garnish. No need to go crazy with that. Rye whiskey. Let's give her a taste. Immediately that citrus smell is so good. I love the citrus on the nose as you go into it. Immediately, it's the nuttiness, a little bit of vanilla and caramel with the barrel-aged rye, and just a touch of that spice that's characteristic of rye whiskey right on the back end. But it also blends with the cherry and the molasses flavors from the sugars, pushing forward more of the oaky and vanilla notes from the whiskey. And then, of course, the bitters adding some of those botanicals, all presented beautifully by the effervescence of the orange and the garnish on top. It's simple, it's delicious. There's a reason that it's been as popular as it's been for as long as it's been popular. Yeah, it's an old fashioned, and it's a drink that everybody should know how to make, I feel like. It's simple, it's easy. And the next time that you get with your friends, you can make them an old fashioned, ask them, did you know where the old fashioned came from?